Welcome to Grace Church, a fellowship that's been serving the South Coast for over 23 years. Grace Church is more than a congregation. They're a family of believers who are ready to welcome you to a place where you can feel the tangible grace of God. Join Grace Church every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for a time of contemporary worship and a relevant message from the Word of God. For more information, please visit gchurch.us. And now here's Pastor Ron Moore with this week's timely message.
I want to talk about making good decisions. Joel 3:14 says, "Thousands upon thousands are waiting in the valley of decision." You know, we live in a pretty amazing time in history. I've often wondered this. When I'm in heaven, what am I going to talk about? Like, there's guys there that have walked on water, parted the Red Sea, made the sun stand still. I mean, killed giants. There are all kinds of stories going around there. I just wonder what we're going to talk about. That's what I used to think until we've been alive in this century. We're living in an amazing time. I got a word this week from a man from New Zealand that said, "It's time." And I believe that. I believe we live in a time of history that's changing the way that we look at this world. Thousands and thousands on the Valley of Decision. In 1979, Xerox showed Steve Jobs a mouse-driven computer interface that they didn't think was a big deal. That was a bad decision, I'm just telling you. He made a complete Apple computer out of it. In 1962, Dick Rowe of Decca Records didn't sign the Beatles to a contract because he thought guitar rock groups were dead. Bad decision. The Japanese Imperial Navy basically invaded Pearl Harbor. That was a bad decision. Asa Calder sold Coca-Cola for $1. That's a bad decision. In 1946, the Donner Party took a shortcut. That was a bad decision. In 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia. He lost 3,000 soldiers in the whole nation of France. Those are bad decisions. In the Bible, we see some bad decisions. Adam took a bite out of the fruit. Cain killed his brother Abel. Lot's wife looked back. And Abraham had a child with his maid. Bad decision. See, I think sometimes we look at decisions that we make in our life and we think, boy, that was a bad one. Deuteronomy chapter 30:19 says, "Today I've given you a choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you've made. Oh, that you would choose life, and so that you and your descendants might live." I always want to add on the end of that, if I would have translated this, I would have said, "Dummy, choose life, dummy, so that you might live." I mean, sometimes we look at our choices, and I look at people who are in this world today, and I see people who have fulfilled lives and blessings and maybe prosperity or maybe notoriety, or I don't know, maybe they've got big ministries, or they've got wonderful businesses. And I begin to think, I wonder what's the difference between people like that seems to have a fulfilled life and then just everybody else. And I begin to think, I wonder if it's because they're smart, or maybe because they're talented, or maybe because they're attractive. Maybe those are the things that causes the differences in people to live an unfulfilled life to a fulfilled life. But I found that it can't be that, because I know a lot of smart people who are pretty miserable. And I know a lot of talented people who are broke. And I know a lot of attractive people who can't hold on to a relationship. And I think the difference, the whole difference in this boils down to one word, and that's decisions. Decisions. I think our decisions are incredibly, basically indescribably important. I think the decisions that you make, I've been around for a while and been in ministry for a long time, and I found that in my ministry there are certain decisions I made, and some of them were good and some of them were bad. And I would love to go back and change the bad decisions, the ones that I made in my life, that I wouldn't do that again, you know. That's not something I want to do. So you make up your decisions, but the reality of it is that your decisions are what makes up you. That every decision you make is going to change your life one way or another. And I find that myself included, I'll talk for me, I won't talk about you, but I'm not a very good decision maker at times. I find most people that aren't decision makers. I find people who make the same mistakes over and over again, and you wonder, when are you going to learn? And then I look at my own life and think, well, when am I going to learn? I mean, as a pastor, I'd like to say, I'd like you to quit making those decisions, and I'll tell you what decisions to make. You know, that would be really easy. It wouldn't be easy for you, but it'd be easier for me. I think the decisions I have is, I want to eat right, but the truth of it is, if there are cookies in the house, I won't. Amen. You know, like Debbie made cookies for the morning group here this morning, and so she had more than what she brought. But this morning there were none left, but she made more. And yesterday I went by and I picked one up, and she said, that's for tomorrow. And I said, I won't eat one tomorrow. And then I ate another one. And then before bed, I said, I think I'll go get a cookie. And then this morning, I got another cookie. And I want to eat right. But I just can't make that right decision for whatever reason. I want to be wise with money, but every once in a while, I overspend. Don't you? I want to be wise with my words, but every once in a while, I find myself saying things I wish I'd never said. And that's what makes Facebook's, I do not get on Facebook because I learned right away, whatever you say stays on there forever. I want to do the right things, but sometimes I don't. I actually want to be a kind and loving person. But oftentimes I find myself hurting people that I want to love the most. I find I'm doing that. I want to be a good decision maker, but most of the time I find out I'm not. And there's some things, the decisions I made that I've regretted in my life. You probably don't want to hear about those, do you? Nobody wants to hear about the time that I broke up with Debbie to take her best friend to the circus. Bad decision. I tell you, we've been married 51 years, and that happened 52 years ago, and it still comes up in conversation. And a lot of times, because Jim Rich brings it up in conversation, my second mistake was telling Jim that I made a mistake. I made dumb decisions. Like in 1986, they made a car called a Chevy Cavalier, and it looked just like a Cadillac Cimarron. And I looked at that car and I thought, you know what? I could take that car, I could knock off the emblems, buy emblems for a Cadillac, and everybody would think I owned a Cadillac. Before I could do that, I found out we found one. We were living in Southern California, in Orange County at that time, and I found out something, that if you could get the newspaper, the ads of the newspaper, somebody told me this, that all these big car lots down there, they have one car that they offer for sale. It's a come on. It will be gone before you get there. But I'm used to getting up really early in the morning, and so on one particular morning, on a Friday morning, because that's when the car ads came out, I got up very early and I found there was a Chevy Cavalier, being sold for $3,999, brand new. It was in Irvine, California. I got in my car. I was there when they opened. I had the piece of paper in my hand. When they opened up, they said, they wanted to sell me a car. I said, I want this car. I showed them that car. She said, oh, we got a lot of those cars in the lot. And I said, no. They were $2,000 more. I said, I want this car for $3,998. And there's the VIN number. Do you have it here? And he reluctantly sold me this car, a 4-speed automatic. If you live in Los Angeles and drive the freeways every day, you really want a 4-speed automatic. Like I burned that clutch out twice the few months that I had it. It was an absolute lemon. It had no carpet. It had no radio. It had one option. And it was listed on the little tag you get. The one option had a back seat. That was the only option that car had. That car was a horrible mess. We hated that car. I couldn't keep a clutch in it because you stop and go traffic the whole time. It was a horrible decision I will never make again, although I've made it several times. Sometimes people say, I wonder where we're going to eat. That's a huge decision. Or Debbie will ask me, what's for dinner? And then I'll tell her, and she'll say, well, no. Things that I shouldn't be eating. So why do we struggle to make good decisions? Why do we do that? Why do we stand and struggle and make all these decisions? First part, this is the introduction to this introduction. Have you ever wanted to do the right thing and did the wrong thing? Paul said it this way. This is in a New Living Translation. He says, I really don't understand myself, for I want to do what's right, and I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. This is Paul, the guy that wrote most of the New Testament, said, I don't understand myself at all. I want to do what's right. I can't do it. I'm thinking, well, if he can't do it, no wonder we're having problems making right decisions. No wonder I'm making problems making right decisions. I found 3 reasons, I think, that we have problems. Number 1, these are going to be real quick, because, it's just the introduction to a sermon, right? We're overwhelmed with choices. They tell us today that we make 35,000 choices a day now. 35,000 choices a day. Some of them are not very important, but many of them are. 20 years ago, we only made 15,000 choices a day. There wasn't that many choices, but today there's lots of choices. We have lots of options. There's lots of thinking, nonstop. All day we make choices, what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to watch, what social media am I going to open up and punch, or where am I going to go? A lot of things to do. There's actually a group of people called, I didn't believe this, I read this in an article the other day. There's a group of people called cognitive scientists. Cognitive scientists. Now, I don't know any kid I've ever talked to say, when I grow up, I want to be a cognitive scientist. But that's what this is, a cognitive scientist, and they've got a thing that they've actually coined, a phrase they've coined called decision fatigue, that we get fatigued from all the decisions we make. And that you come to a place where if you're tired enough of making decisions, that you reach your limit, and at that point you begin to make bad decisions. Like you could be working as an accountant, and you could be making good decisions about financial institution and going on, and you do it all day long, and when you get home, what you don't want to do is you don't want to make any more decisions. And if you have to make decisions, you won't really think about it. And they said this whole idea of cognitive fatigue, that's where a lot of bad decisions by people who say, I knew better than to do that. He says this, that as the volume of decisions increase, the quality of the decisions decrease. I've got here binge eating. I'm thinking, I'm not going to say that. But I already did, didn't I? Came right out of my mouth. Sometimes when I think, I'm going to do really well, I'm going to do really well, and the day's over and I'm getting tired, and, well, bad decisions are made. Number 2, we're afraid of making wrong choices. This is especially true, I believe, of Christians, because every one of us want the will of God. And we want the perfect will of God in our life. And so we're afraid to make choices, and what happens is we get into indecision. No decision. No decision, by the way, is a decision. If you decide not to make a decision, that's a decision. If you say this is, I don't even want to make this decision, if you think about this, it's kind of hard on your brain right now because some of you may be in decision fatigue. But if you decide not to make a decision, then you have decided. There's a decision there. And I can just tell you that anybody in indecision, if you don't know, and I know a lot of people don't want to make decisions. This is my worst decision I have to make. If you asked me this, I will not give you an answer because I hate making this. Because most of the time when I make this decision, I find I get in trouble over it, and that is this: where would you like to eat? And I say this every time: I don't care, you make that decision. I like it when Jim asks me that. I have now figured out how not to have to answer that question with Jim. He doesn't even ask me anymore. Jim will say, hey, where do you want to go to eat? And I'll say, I'm thinking about, how about the Himalayan? That would be good. We could have Indian food. Yeah. He'll say, oh, no. I think, okay, your choice. Because the reality of it is I made a decision that I wasn't going to make that decision, right? I've spent enough time on that. We've spent, I just tell you, I've known Jim since we were children in the Lord. Since we were younger. And we have actually spent more time talking about where we're going to eat than we ate. We figured it out. Ask Jackie and Debbie. They're afraid of nothing. Let emotions overrule. We let emotions overrule logic. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because this is me. I let my emotions overrule my logic. Like, I love to plan. I love actually to spend way too much time analyzing a situation. So when we were riding motorcycle a lot, I would get in charge. I wanted to be in charge of the route. Because you know what I like doing more than going on vacation is planning the vacation. And it is fed over into my sons. But it started with me. And so the last time, we went on a couple of motorcycle rides and they were all doing it wrong. So third motorcycle ride, I figured it out. I said, this is what time we're going to start. We're going to be in Reedsport. About an hour later, let's grab a cup of coffee. And I wrote down the place I wanted to drink coffee at. 2 hours later, we were in someplace, Newport or someplace. That's where we're going to eat lunch. And I wrote down the place we're going to eat lunch. We might need gas about an hour later than that. And we had the gas station to make sure we're all filled up. I got where we're having dinner that evening and what motel we're going to stay at and what time we're getting up the next morning. And by the time I had a small leaflet, and I was so proud of this leaflet, and I would hand it out to everybody and say, this is our plan. And I had spent way more time working on the plan for that vacation than we had in vacation. Because I enjoyed it. The emotional rush was great. It was actually sometimes more fun than what we did. And if you look back at it, all that planning was for absolutely no reason. There's really not a whole lot of reason. We were going on the trip, and about lunchtime, we were going to eat anyway, and about gas time, when it was all out, we were going to get gas. We didn't really have to plan all that, but we spent all that time. I spent all that time. It wasn't necessarily that good of a reason, of a decision to make. I find myself over-analyzing things that don't matter and making impulse decisions on things that do. In other words, I'm not really thinking about some things, and I just do them. The older I get, I've been burned too many times, and now I start thinking a lot. My wife thinks I'm asleep. She'll ask me a question, and she'll say, did you hear me? And I say, yes, I'm thinking. And she says, well, let me know when you finish thinking. And then she'll walk off. Because I've learned, that I can't live off my emotions, but I can't be overruled by logic. A lot of you remember when you were parents with kids in the house, or maybe still have kids in the house, and logic says, be patient. But your emotion says, yell as loud as you can. Now, yelling as loud as you can does more damage than just being patient. I can say that now because my kids are out of the house. And now I'm saying to them, quit yelling at the kids, which are my grandkids who do not need to be yelled at. You you have some temptation, your logic says, this is not wise. But your emotion says, man, let's party. Let's do this. I try to talk to my wife. My wife, she likes to go on, what's the lines? What's it called? Zip line. I've never been on a zip line. I never planned to get on a zip line. My logic has overruled my insanity. But she does that. So let's chat. So don't make, this is what I want to tell you. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. Don't make permanent decisions. Way too many lives have been destroyed by that. It is the reason that tattoo parlors are in business. People don't think about these things. Obviously, because I can tell you a tattoo that somebody's thought about and one that had alcohol involved. From the tattoo artist, I'm afraid. Because the quality of our decision determines the quality of our lives. Our lives are actually a complication of our decisions that we're making. That was the introduction to what I want to say here later, but let me talk about the power, is what I want to say, the power of pre-deciding. I had a trouble with this because I was going to call it the power of premeditation. Well, that just sounded like murder to me, so I just dropped that. What I'm really talking about here is choosing ahead of the time before the thing happens. Choosing before it happens. Proverbs 16:3 says this, commit your actions to the Lord. Commit your actions to the Lord. That means your marriage, your finances, your family, your down to what you wear and what you eat. Just commit all your actions to the Lord. And he says this, and then your plans will succeed. It's a lot what Jesus said when he says, seek the kingdom of God above all else, live righteously, and he'll give you everything you need. It's a process that if we can predetermine, commit everything to God, things will come around. We're going to determine our course of action. We're going to determine our course of action before the moment of decision. So if you could predetermine how you're going to react, act, or say, speak, do, because we all get faced with all these scenarios, should I look at that? Should I buy this? Should I reach out to that person? Should I respond? Should I yell? All those things. But we come to a place when faced with an issue, we have pre-decided what we're going to do. Like, I know this. I know I should do this. When I have an impulse to buy something, my pre-decided action is, why don't we wait 3 days? Now, when I tell people that, they say, but it's on sale now. But I've made enough bad decisions in buying things to know that I actually save money if I will think about it for a few days, even if I have to pay full price. I have a lot of things. We had a yard sale 3 or 4 weeks ago, and in that yard sale was a lot of things that we thought were really good buy, but we never used them again. And so what we paid $5 for, we sold for a nickel. So when I have an impulsive purchase, I'm going to wait 3 days. When I'm worried, I have pre-decided that God's got this. Do you know how unhealthy it is to worry and fret? It's terrible on us. This is the one I wrote. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm going to pray that they go to heaven. Instead of telling them to go somewhere else. Let me show you some pre-decided moments in the Bible. It's Genesis 22. God told Abel to give his son as a sacrifice to kill him. Abraham had already decided that he was going to be faithful to whatever God said. We think, how could he even begin to do that? He had already pre-decided that. It was already set in his mind. Ruth, you remember where Naomi says, I'll go where you'll go. I'll do what you do. Your God will be my God. Pre-deciding a lot of stuff. Daniel in the lion's den. And then, well, how could they have that process? But you'll find this. Daniel said this, I was determined, that's pre-decided, I was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He already decided, he pre-decided when he was faced with another culture, he was not going to involve in that culture. He was not going to fall into that culture. In the world that we live in today, culture is changing quickly, and it's so easy to slip into the culture, the ease of the communities that we're in. And Daniel and the three Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had decided that they were not going to do that. You got to know who you are and who you value. You got to know what you are and what you value. You got to know who he is and what he values. It becomes a little bit easier that way, because when your values are clear, listen, when your values are clear, your decisions are easier. When your values are clear, your decisions are easier. When you already, listen, we do this. Everyone has done this already. I believe the Bible's true. So when I hear somebody say, well, the Bible isn't true, I think, well, they just don't know, because I already believe the Bible's true. Like, you don't have to, you can't disprove the Bible to me, because it's already one of my values that the Bible is true. We had a sermon about not long ago about the infallibility of the Bible. I believe the whole Bible's true, see? I have people say, well, I don't believe in miracles. I'm sorry, that's already set in my mind. I'm not going to ask you to believe in miracles. I already believe in miracles. I'm a living miracle. I've had miracles in my life. I've seen miracles. It's too late. It's already there. So when somebody comes and says, that's scientifically or that's physiologically impossible, I said, well, I know. I don't want to tell you. You're not changing my mind, because I'm already predetermined this is how it is in my life. And that could be classified as stubborn, but it's not stubborn. It's just that this is what I have predetermined. I have values and they're clear, and that makes the decision a lot easier. Now, when Ryan was being born, when he we found out that Debbie was with child, there was a problem there, and the doctor came and says, we've got a problem with the child, and the pregnancy has got to be aborted within the next just few minutes. Now, all of a sudden, my values are clear, and it makes my decision should have been easier, but I found out how clear my values were, because all of a sudden, they're saying it's a life and death. It's either the baby or your wife. No, it's either your baby or your baby and your wife. Both are going to die in this if we don't abort that baby. So all of a sudden, I have to come back now, and now I'm in anguish. I'm having to say, I wonder what we're supposed to do at this point, because I never, ever thought of ever being in that situation, and never crossed my mind that I would ever have to have that conclusion. And therefore, the decision wasn't as easy. I'm beginning to vacillate, and I had to stop and ask God, what am I to do in this situation? I know what I'm supposed to do, but there's so many other extenuating circumstances. What am I actually going to do? We're glad that God spoke to us, because I have a pretty good son right now because of that. When you know what you value and you decided ahead of time, that when you reach that situation, it's a whole lot easier. It's already pre-decided. So when faced with, I've got in your notes, when faced with, this is the slide we're at, when you're faced with blank, I've pre-decided to blank. I was going to write that on the side notes over there, but it just didn't work out. But I think that there's probably 100 things you can do. But let me tell you something. When I'm faced with this situation, good decisions are going to save me from a damaged destiny. How many have a situation in your life right now? It'd be quite odd if you did not. Quite odd if you did not. Every one of us has situations. And most of the time when we react to the situation either ungodly or unchristian or in a way that damages people is because we really haven't thought the thing through. What am I going to do and what I'm going to say at this point? I worked as a carpenter for a lot of years. As a Christian man, I was a journeyman carpenter. And if you won't believe this, but journeyman carpenters don't necessarily have the most clean language. And if you're a carpenter, oh, did I show you my thumb? I smashed my thumb trying to be a carpenter. If you're a carpenter, you will smash your thumb. It's a given. And I was a framing carpenter, and so we had corrugated heads, sharp teeth in that head to drive those nails. And I had predetermined, after listening to the guys I was around, and of course telling them that I was a Christian man, I had determined that I was not going to say any swear words. I just predetermined that. And I still have people who say, I don't believe you made it through. I made it through. Because it was already predetermined I wasn't going to say any of those words. When I smashed my thumb, I showed my brother, and I said, look what I did. And I super glued my thumbnail back on. I wonder if that's dangerous. I was going to ask Cassie, but she's sick, and I'm not sure. So if super gluing a thumbnail back on is dangerous, let me know. Because after I did that, I thought, man, what if my thumb rots off? So my brother asked me, he said, did you say a bad word? No. Come on, Ron, you had to say a bad word. I realized he hadn't already decided he wasn't going to say that. See, there's certain areas that we come into that we've pre-decided, I'm not going to go the way of culture, or I'm not going to go the way that my flesh is. I am faced with this decision. I have pre-decided to do this. It sometimes is a problem with me, because when faced with receiving the wrong amount of money in change, we don't have that problem anymore. It's all on my debit card. But I used to actually get change, and people would have to count change. And one time, this lady, she gave me $5 too much. And I said, ma'am, you've made a mistake. And she got mad at me. Actually, she didn't say, she wasn't happy. And she said, I don't make mistakes. And I said, well, you made a $5 mistake. And she said, I did not. And I said, I owe you $5. Now, at that point, I was thinking about keeping the $5, but when faced with that situation, I've already decided I'm not going to keep the money. Just already decided that. So it's not even hard. It's just like, just give it back and keep going. Now, one time it was $115. When I'm faced with a $115 mistake, I realized I hadn't really pre-decided that. I had to decide it at that moment to go ahead and give it back. But when they're easy ones, it all of a sudden becomes so simple because we've already pre-decided, oh man, what we're going to say. Let me do this. Decisions, is this my next one? Decisions determine direction, and directions determine destiny. So let me just give you these three in a row, because I'm not going to say anything. If your life is moving in your life is moving in the direction of your decisions. If you don't like, third one, if you don't like the direction your decisions are taking you, maybe you need to change your directions. Like I don't know why my life is going this way. Probably because of the decisions that you've made, that we all make, that we haven't decided these things to see which way we're going. It's time. You see, if it isn't working, then we probably ought to try to do something different. And doing something different is so hard in our lives because we've already pre-decided the way we're going, and now God's moving us in a different direction. Like when I was a carpenter, I was always going to be a carpenter. I actually had my contractor's license at that time. When God comes to me and says, I want you to quit your job and begin to preach. And I said, I don't want to. I would rather make money. And I fought with God for several years on that I didn't want to do this. My dad was a pastor. I didn't like what he did. I certainly wasn't going to jump into it. And so because I had already pre-decided my life, my life directions, my decisions were leading my life. All of a sudden I have to stop and allow God to lead our lives. This church got a word not long ago and said he's doing a new thing. And I thought, oh no, I like the old thing. So anyway. So here's my negative qualities. This is what probably I'm going to preach about for the next few weeks. Negative qualities. This is me. 6 things that I wrote down. I'm often unprepared. I have a spiritual enemy. He's Satan. And sometimes he attacks me in ways that I was not prepared for. Have you ever been caught off guard? All of a sudden you didn't think that was going to happen, and it did. Our family had just been caught off guard. We were kind of prepared, but not really prepared. I'm sometimes unprepared. I'm often unprepared. I'm inconsistent. I want to be consistent. I want to do the right things over and over again. But sometimes, especially when I'm tired, I just do the wrong thing. I'm inconsistent. This was actually what I was going to preach about today. I'm unintentional. Instead of being proactive and prayerful about certain things, I find myself like that. Sometimes it's like, que sera, sera. Or I'm kind of, I'm just kind of lazy about the whole thing. I'm not intentional. I hate this one. I hate this about me so much, but sometimes I'm pretty selfish. I'm pretty self-centered. Like if I get a group picture, and there's 8 people in the picture, who am I looking at? I don't care about the 7. I'm looking at myself. Like Debbie would say, did you see me in that picture? No, I didn't even look at you in that picture. I was looking at me in that picture. Don't you do that? Huh? Yeah, everybody does that. Is it just me? Well, that's it. I'm selfish. I hate that about myself. I hate it. How do I look? Or how much is it going to cost me? Or what I have to do. I mean, it's all about me at that point. I hate that part. That way, another problem is I'm short-sighted. When things go wrong, I just think, I'll just quit. I got a little shop in my house, and I was turning a bowl. Actually, Verna and Debbie bought me a piece of myrtle wood, a big, nice hunk of myrtle wood. What we didn't know, that inside that myrtle wood, there was a great big crack. And so I'm turning the bowl, and as I'm turning the bowl, I see this crack. It begins to expand. And I think, well, I'm going to go on the inside and cut on the inside and see how deep it goes. And come to find out, it was all the way through. And so I thought, so I put some epoxy in it. And I kept cutting. And the more I cut, the more cracks were in it. Now, you'd think that was going to look really good. And maybe it would look really good if somebody knew what they were doing. But I can't see that. I couldn't see finishing it. I've told people this story before, and they said, oh, you had to finish it. It'll look really beautiful. You finish it, because I quit. A little bit short-sighted. So sometimes I tend to quit. That's what the last one was. So here's what I want you to do. This is the part where you get to preach. You get to declare, because you've been sitting kind of quiet, so I'm going to let you do this. When you know who you are, you'll know what to do. See, when you know who you are, is that a slide I got up there, Ryan? And you know who you are, you'll know what to do. And the next one is, when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. At least easier. So here's what I want. Get ready to say something. Okay? Because we'll make some declarations. That's how we're going to end today, because I'm running a little bit over. Going to get ready to speak. When the devil attacks, we're not going to be unprepared. Go to this next slide, Ryan. Well, we were unprepared, but I'm going to be ready. Now, that's a declaration. Somebody say, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Good. So, what are you? What are you? I'm ready. See? So we're declaring this, that I'm not going to be unprepared anymore, but I'm going to be easy. I'm not going to be inconsistent anymore. I'm not going to be on one day or off the next day. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to preach about this in the coming days. You'll get it. But right now we're going to make this decree, this declaration. We're going to predetermine I'm going to be consistent. Somebody say consistent. Okay, I'm very good. See, you guys are preaching. I can just stop. We're in it. Number 3, in a world where people often stray from God and take God for granted, all these things that we do sometimes, I'm going to be devoted. Somebody say devoted. What are you? Oh, we're rolling now. In a world where I'm selfish, I'm going to be generous. Oh, scare you, man. I'm telling you, in a time where I think about me more than I think anybody else, I'm not going to be selfish, but I'm going to be generous. Say it again. I'm going to be generous. You'd be surprised how cool it is to be generous. You don't even have to do much to be generous. I was driving down the road a couple of weeks ago. These guys were out of gas on the side of the road. I said, hey, if you can wait for a minute, I got 2 gallons of gas at my house. I'll run back and give it to you. And so we filled up the tank, and they left. And I thought, well, that wasn't even generous of me, by the way. That was just, I had these 2 gallons of gas. And it would have just got bad sitting in my garage. You know, it's like, I can help them out. I went to back alley for lunch. My family and I went to back alley for lunch. A lady walks up and says, what you did for those people was so inspiring. She went by and gave him $20. See, generosity has a tendency to be contagious. Stinginess has a tendency, never mind. That's another story. When everybody in this world seems to be unfaithful to everything, when you can't depend on anybody, I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to be faithful. You say it with me, faithful? Faithful. So I'm going to be what? Faithful. Ah, you guys. And finally, you know what Jesus did on the cross? He was a finisher, man. He was a finisher. He even said this. He said at the end of it, I'm finished. Paul said the same thing in his writing. He said, I finished the course. I'm going to be a finisher. I'm not going to be a quitter. I'm going to be a finisher. Somebody say finisher. See, what are we going to be? Finishers. It's easy. It's easy. We're finishers. We're not what the world says we are. We're not what the devil says we are. We are not what we did in the past life. It's not what even people think about us who we are. We are, as that song we sang today, we are who God says we are. That's who we are. Who are we? Well, I'm ready and consistent and devoted and generous and faithful, and I'm a finisher. So one day when you're tired and you're overwhelmed, and maybe you're even a little angry or emotional or discouraged or depressed, and you don't know what to do, and you're feeling just a little bit vulnerable of everything that's going on, the good news is, listen to this. This is a slide that I want you to look at. Because when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. The good news is that we're not saved by how we decide. We are saved because Jesus made a decision. He said, if you can get this to pass, Lord, this whole idea of the crucifixion, giving my life, if there's another way, well, choose it, but nevertheless, not my will, thy will be done. He did that before he ever thought about, listen, he pre-decided, that's hard to say. He pre-decided in Gethsemane, he said, no matter what comes my way, no matter what price I have to pay, no matter how much pain I have to go through, no matter how hard it is, I've already decided I'm going to do this. Because he did that, that's how we can live a life of victory. Because he was victorious, because he decided, he made a decision before even he began his process. I've already decided I'm going to do it no matter what. And the day and age we live in today, there's way too many options and way too many decisions. And everybody can be anything and everything anymore. And we have to decide who we are in Christ and what we are in Christ and how we're going to go through and make this whole life victorious. Amen?
We hope you've enjoyed this message from Grace Church. Make sure to stay connected throughout the week online at gchurch.us and on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.